It's Classical Percussion Day. Welcome to Open Mind Alexander Technique. My name is Jess. I work with musicians working with Alexander Technique, and today we're diving into how to work with and what are some challenges and suggestions that come up for my percussion students as they're taking Alexander Technique lessons. So the first thing we're going to look at is some commonalities between various different percussion instruments that are played standing. I've got a different instrument on a different video on playing seated percussion instruments, drum kit, timpani, hand drums, stuff like that. So go check that out as well. Just didn't fit, it was way too long of a video. So first thing we need to check in with is, how do we stand in neutral in ways that are helpful? Well, I'm going to want to have good support from my feet, allowing my feet to take up space. If I'm standing with my heels touching each other, or even just particularly close to each other, what I'm asking for is this to be a very narrow tower that's going to have a little bit more trouble supporting itself and stabilizing. So I'm going to allow some room at my foundations. Next up is my knees. Knees are hinges. They only want to go forwards. We hear all the time, don't lock your knees back. Are we really thinking about that while we're playing, or even just getting set up to play? Allowing the knees to release forward doesn't necessarily mean having to bend the knees. It's just not locking them back. So letting the knees trend forward and be soft. From there, if my knees are released forward compared to what? Compared to my torso. So where my leg connects to my torso is my hip joint, this ball and socket joint here. I'm allowed to bend there. A lot more than a lot of people think. So what can happen for a lot of folks who have to consistently interact with something that is down, such as a lot of percussion instruments, they do it by bending in the spine rather than in their legs. That's the most common things that comes up for my percussion players. So, finding our neutral first, just standing, taking the time to really learn where is my sustainable neutral place, where I could look at something that is straight ahead, such as playing a high instrument, something like chimes, triangle might be this height, tubular bells are going to be higher frequently. And notice none of that made me change my back. I'm just moving my arms. This neutral is what gives me sustainability and efficiency for my movement. So we've talked about feet, knees, hip joints. From there, my back is not straight. My back has 4 natural curves to it. Those are allowed to be there, and I can ask for lengthening and widening so that I have soft, easy connections between all of these different joints in my spine. What I don't want is to put a hefty bend into a place in my spine that I use really consistently as part of my playing. Musicianship tends to be very repetitive. Percussion in particular, you're doing a lot of the same things for a long time. And so if we're doing that by being here, this is long-term back pain asking to happen. I'm neutral, and if I need to look down, looking down comes from my legs. This is looking down. I can see even further down than I need to. I can see my toes right now with just my eyeballs without having to take my neck forward and bend my spine. How did I do that? Same directions as before. I sent my knees forward and moved the base of my torso tower back. So the whole thing can still stay neutral. And notice that the distance between my chin and my chest stayed the same. This is sustainable standing percussion playing. This is what I work with my students on. We first work with this away from the instrument in here, and then after many weeks of that, then we go down into the percussion room and start playing around with their lovely playground of stuff down there. And it's here. So if you're not able to change the height of your instrument, you have to change the height of you. How do we do that in a way that's sustainable? By doing it from your legs. So I recently worked with a classical percussionist who was like 6'2" or 6'3", and sure, there are times that he could like raise the height of the snare drum, or he could raise the height of the marimba to a certain level, but when he's playing in a percussion ensemble, they have to cater to basically the height of the shortest person, because it's even less helpful to be up here and trying to drum like this for somebody who's short playing on the same instrument as someone who's 6'3". So it's low. And so for him, it's the equivalent of being here. And so we worked a lot on being able to lunge and keep my back here, keep his back in the same position so that I can use my mallets wherever they need to go. We need full functionality here without making my spine bend in ways that's hurtful. Same thing with going up onto higher setups, being able to be here. In some ways, it's almost like sitting back away from it to make sure that I'm not curling my pelvis forward, kind of tucking my tail under and being here. But I also don't want to go too far the other direction and arch to reach something up high like tubular bells. Keeping this neutral, use a mirror, use a camera pointing at yourself from the side, all of those things are going to help. So if we put these down all the way, we'll be able to mimic some of these bigger, large mallet instruments. Marimba, xylophone, all of those guys. All right. Again, I'm keeping my back away from my arms. That's the difference. I'm not going forward. You can see how my pelvis just went forward in space. That sent me really far with my weight onto my toes. That's not stable. Keeping my weight back means that I'm counterbalancing. My pelvis is going back, my knees are going forward, and my upper body is going forward. So my balance is still in the middle of my feet, and I'm really stable. That helps with my balance, and it also helps with my consistency to be able to find my intervals and be at the exact same place every time, because I'm not changing this. If we're working with double mallet instruments, same thing applies, right? Using this rotation in the arms to be able to hit these. It still comes from the legs. So even though a lot of these instruments feel a lot less whole self than something like drum kit, where you're actively playing instruments with your feet, it's still really all of you making sure that you can reach these giant, really cool instruments. So practice it. Sending the knees forward, keeping the pelvis back, and looking down comes from your legs. And notice that right now, I didn't need to do this and compress the back of my neck in order to look up. I can see the camera, I can see my imaginary conductor over there with just my eyes. So right now I can see where my mallets are hitting, and I can see over there without moving my neck because I can use my eyeballs. So for ye classical percussionists, any percussion that's played standing, practice standing first. Coming up, allowing expansiveness, allowing freedom of movement, and using more legs than you might expect. Give it a try.